Hey everyone, so a quick update on the status of this project. I think I am really close to being ready to release this. As I said, the intention was to get the grunt work out of the way and then make this project available to everyone, non-exclusive license, so that means everyone can make their own version if they so choose, whether you want it to be commercial and sell a new application based on this, or if you wish to make an application but make it free to use, everyone's available, everyone's allowed to do whatever they want with it because that's the nature of a non-exclusive license. One person can go ahead and make a paid application, someone else can independently make a free application, and that's fine. Neither one has a claim to the other because, again, the source project is a non-exclusive license. So let's see what we have. So first of all, as you can see, you now have a grid here. That's really quite minor. I just added a square texture to the material. So instead of having a solid, and I believe it was translucent color for the bottom, it is now a grid. Functionally doesn't make any difference. It really isn't that much of an improvement, but it does help when you're building the bottom layer so you can see exactly where it's going to be placed. Second of all, the delete all button now works. I believe in the last video I called it clear all or something like that. And like I said at the time, it was just placeholder because I thought of it in the middle of the night and said, okay, I'm going to just put this button here so I don't forget. This now works. I don't have an advisory there yet. You really should, so people don't lose all their work accidentally. Particularly if you start making soft keys, like press F7 to delete all, that kind of thing. So we're definitely going to want to add a message that says, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Okay, as you can see, there's a few more colors here. They're still not programmed. I'm just kind of carving out the space. I made these a little bit smaller, and I think that's about the smallest I want them to be. I still think that is larger in size than Magic of Voxel. Haven't used that in a while. I don't want these color. I don't want. It's not just the colors. It's really the buttons themselves. I don't want them to be too small. As much as I liked using Anime Studio Pro, the buttons were so small that more than any other application I've ever used, I had more misclicks. Like multiple times during a single session, I would click on the wrong button because they were just so small. But I think this size is still decent. So I still have to add the functionality for the colors, but I might not do all of them simply because you guys will probably add your own colors. These are somewhat random as far as I wanted to get major colors like greens, blues, purples, yellows, orange, reds, grays, that kind of thing. So there isn't like any deep science or anything to this. It is fairly random. Okay, so what else did we do? The single biggest thing that I did is I changed the way the meta shapes are handled because in the last video I had added two buttons, one that said 1 and one that said 9. So 1 was the normal single block. You click on it and then you place a single block. The 9 created a 9 by 9 square, and I said what I really needed to do was to separate the functionality of the shape and the size. And what I decided to do was just create a dedicated button to each combination of shape and size because I want to keep this as simple as possible for the user. And so the more buttons you have to click to define the tool that's being used, I think that it's actually easier just to have a dedicated button. So as you can see, rather than just a single button that says 9, we now have line 5, line 9, square 5, square 9, triangle 5, triangle 9, circle 7, and circle 9. I didn't do 5 because a circle with a diameter of 5 in voxel doesn't look like a circle. It looks more like a diamond shape. Okay, so what I changed as far as coding as well, as I mentioned, the 9 by 9 shape was actually a prefab. That I really kind of cheated. I just made a prefab and that you were instantiating the prefab. While that was okay for placeholder functionality, it was terrible for scaling. Very quickly, I realized I could not use that and that I really had to take a different approach, which I even referred to in the last video, and that is now the shape is properly instantiated using a series of C# instantiate commands. So if you want, we can pop over there to take a look at it. And it's not optimized. I'm sure someone like Tech Dave probably could reduce the code by 40, 50, 60% based on some of the suggestions he's made in the past. So code is definitely not optimized. But again, this was transitional. I went from a prefab approach, which would not scale, to a C# approach that will scale, and then you can optimize at that point. So it is the click check script. I know we really haven't gone through the script, so this is only going to be just so much. But in short, this script is attached to the tiles on the bottom and to every shape that you click on that can be built upon, because certain shapes you cannot build upon, like the right now the pyramids you can't build on top of. So anything with like a point like that, I just presume that there isn't going to be anything on top of it. Okay, so anything that you can build on top of, this script will be attached to. And so when the mouse is pressed down on it, the left mouse button, we check the name and we check the tool. We want to make sure that it's in the placement mode, not delete mode, and not paint mode. Okay, so if you click on a tile, it instantiates the single block, but then it looks to see if you have clicked on one of the other buttons: square 9, square 5, line 9, so on and so forth. And then, as you can see, this is a custom function that I made. So you just go up to that, and we'll take square 9 because that is the least optimized one. There. So rather than a prefab, instead what you've got are a bunch of instantiate commands. Now what's going to happen is this will be optimized eventually. Either I'll do it before I release it, but probably not. This would be replaced with just one or two instantiate commands, and instead there will be multiple nested for commands. So for x equals -4, semicolon, x less than +4, semicolon, x plus equals 1. So in other words, you're incrementing it by 1. So as long as it's between -4 and +4, you increase it by 1 because that's the range. As you can see, -4 to +4 is the range. Say 3, 2, 1, so on and so forth. And then the other for loop, I want to keep saying for next because that's what it used to be years ago in BASIC. It was a for next loop, but you don't need to, you don't use the word next. Not that you don't need to, you do not use the word next anymore. And you can see likewise z ranges between 4 and -4. So you'd basically have a couple nested for loops that increment the x and the z values, which then get calculated into the instantiate command. So yeah, you don't need all this. This was just me, again, doing the initial transition from prefab to coding, and then you'd go from this to optimization. And again, you would use a for loop, or well, a couple for loops to do this. The other ones aren't so bad because some of them are fairly short, like line 9. You probably could use a for loop for that, but it gets to the point like, is it worth it at that point? Now, the other thing that changing to a for loop will do is, as I said, the constants that you're using are, in the case of the shape, the corners. So if you're saying 4x goes from -4 to +4, and z goes from -4 to +4, well, those are the four corners. So if you want to make a larger shape, you just change those constants to 5, 5, 5, 5, 6, 6, 6, 6. So once this gets optimized with for loops, then you could make as many iterations of this as you want with just a few extra lines. But keep in mind, though, only so many, it only makes sense to make just so much because you don't want the user to have to scroll through 20, well, 20 isn't bad, but 50, 60, 70, 80 different options for what they're looking for. Okay, so let's actually see this. And so, as I said, previously I had a 9 by 9 block of squares and triangles, but because we're using C# code that is automatically saying what's the current shape, once I coded this once, it suddenly worked for every single shape. So the approach that I'd taken using the array scaled well once I stopped being lazy and did the coding like I should. Because as soon as I coded it once, they all work. So let's see if we have line 5. So we didn't have line 5 last time, and yes, you can stack it. Line 9, you can stack that. You can stack them on top of each other, so you could do that. Maybe you're trying to create windows or something. You could delete manually too, but it's good to keep in mind the different ways people could use this. And like I said, it automatically works for the other shapes. So there's a 9, there's a 5, 5, 9, 5, 9. What did I not do 9? Okay, I must have just clicked. I must have done a misclick. Let's delete all. Line 5 for these guys, and yes, they stack, and yes, they stack on top of each other as well. And we'll stack that on top of that. So you can actually start making things really quickly. I gotta admit, when I switched to this coding, it really revitalized me because it finally started to feel like an actual tool that you could be productive with. Because at first it was a neat idea and a learning mechanism, and I was pleased with what it accomplished, but it didn't really feel like this was a viable tool. Now it really can be, or at least we're getting close. So yeah, we went over to that, and this, like I said, is just a flip of that shape. And I'm not going to go through all these. I think I've demonstrated that they work. Oops, actually it wasn't square, it was line. And delete all. So we'll do square 9. And then, like I said, you could put those on top of it. And maybe a couple more times. Maybe this is like a barricade. And now you suddenly have a surrounded with spikes. Maybe you're going to create a door entry somewhere here. Then you could just do delete. Delete only does single block deletes. So unlike some applications, it does not delete in the shape of a tool. So if you could do something like that. So now you have a doorway. And like I said, I don't have any notions that people would use this as the 3D modeler for their final graphics. But if we can give people something that is easy to use, it will help them be able to make placeholder graphics really, really quickly. And, particularly for an indie developer, I think that's massive because the last thing an indie developer wants to do is start having to use finances to buy temporary resources, only to go back and have to buy permanent resources, or worse, buy permanent resources and then they don't do the job. So, in other words, the resources you bought do not meet your needs. So, I think that's about it. I'll show you the circle. Circle doesn't look that great, but again, it's because it's such a small size. So we could do circle 7 of that. Circle 7. Oh, I'm still in delete. See, I mentioned that before, and I've had this problem with other applications as well, as you don't know what tool you're in. So even if this was highlighted, it might not readily stick out. So either we need to make the active button or selected button more evident, or like I said, my idea was to show a preview up here of what you're doing. So like if it was delete, then maybe up here it would say current and then say delete and show like an X or something. So circle 7. There we go. So that one doesn't look so great. If we delete all, we do circle 9. That looks a little bit better, but again, even 9 is a little bit iffy. You probably would have to have a minimum of 11, because if you stretch it out to 11, what happens is this and this, rather than being singles, they would both be double lines. So it would be like here and here, here and here. And then that makes it, rather than going from a 3 to a 1 to a 1, it'd be a 3 to a 2 to a 2 to a 3. So it makes it a little bit more consistent. So like I said, some of these shapes don't look so great for the small size. And like the triangles, eh. So like that triangle doesn't look great. That one, however, looks better. And then we have, I think I did triangle 9. Yeah, but it's really not 9. If we're counting this side as the measurement, it's only 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, because that's what the, in this case, what the 5 and the 9 relate to. Okay, so I think that's about it. None of the other functionality has changed. So if you do, say, square 9 and you click on wood, it applies the wood texture. You zoom in, you can see it. Like I said, this one's a little bit faint, but again, I spent like, maybe 2 minutes drawing it. Again, it was just placeholder. Um, and then we could do, say, square 9, and then this one is the rock. Now, certain of these textures don't work well for the shapes made by um, uh, Pro Builder. Sorry, because what's happening is you're basically making many facings, and so it's taking that whole texture and repeating it over and over again. So for some of these don't look great. So once I remove Pro Builder, I will probably, like I said, just pre-make these shapes in an um, external 3D modeler. That way, there's no dependency, because I do think there's an issue where you're not allowed to redistribute those, even though they're owned by Unity and they're free to use. I don't think you're able to redistribute them for whatever reason. So basically, I want to remove that dependency. So I could be wrong about that, but it just seems that whenever I've bought a package that required a dependency, they did not have it installed. Like even uh, post-processing, there was ones like, okay, click here to install post-processing. For some reason, it's not installed with the package. So I don't know if that's a limitation or not, but I definitely certainly don't want to violate any rules that Unity has set out. But I think you can see that, at least in my opinion, this has really come together fairly quickly. And like I said, I'm about ready to release this. And then you guys can do whatever you want with it. I'll put it on itch.io. That's where that's where I do all my distribution. And it'll be zero cost and really close. So, thoughts as far as what I want to, what would be nice to add. I myself probably won't, but both of these are starting to take up a lot of space. And so to be able to add more shapes and more buttons, basically you can either shrink the button size, and I kind of don't want to because I think that this is one of the key things you care about. Because even if this is small, you can still see the color. Whereas if these are small, you might not be able to clearly see what you're building. So what I'd like to see is, rather than just having a 2D image here, that these are proper scrolling windows. So what you'd have is you would have, just like any other, Windows window, you would have like an up and down button, and you could scroll up and down. So you could just scroll through as many rows as you want. So you could add 100 shapes if you wanted, and it wouldn't take up any more room because you could just scroll through that. So creating a scrolling window would probably be advisable. And like I said, even though I like this, it will only scale just so far, because what if someone wants a line 11, a line 13? Those aren't bad because those you can add yourself. But what about a square 10 or a square 11? A square 9 isn't really going to cut it. You basically have to redraw it anyways. And which ones can really replace others, because do you really need squares if you can just do lines? So it depends. If you want to build 10 squares high, then yeah, you really don't want to have to do that one line at a time. So again, those are all the kind of development decisions that you guys can undertake. And so it's close. We'll see when I release this. Possibly this weekend. It depends how much I'm overcome by sloth, and that will determine. So if I am doing nothing, then I will probably let it slide, unfortunately, and then get it for the next weekend. But if I am determined, then I will hopefully get this out by this weekend. But again, it's really an arbitrary release date, because again, you guys would take this in and do whatever you see fit. Okay, so if there's any features that you think could be reasonably added, then feel free to put it in the comments. But like I said, I'm very close because I think I've gotten through the basic grunt work, the boring stuff. I've created the foundation, and now you guys can build upon it and do as you so fit. So like I said, I want to clear up a few more things. Another thing that this can't do, even though internally it can save the project, I have not added a way to export as an OBJ or FBX. So obviously that would be something that someone would need to add, or else it's useless. Other than taking a 2D screenshot, this modeler would be useless if you cannot actually export. So that's something that someone would need to do. Also be able to load previous projects. That's something else that would really need to be done as well. So that's about it as far as ideas that I'd like to see the community do if anyone's interested. So make these into proper scrollable windows, exporting or else it's pretty useless, and loading pre-made projects. And one other thing that was mentioned is right now this is in 2021 2021.1, and Tech Dave pointed out that probably the best bet would be to use an LTS. So like 2020 LTS, I think it's yeah. So there's 2020 and there's 2019. So I'm not sure if I really could easily downgrade it. I'm not sure if there's even a mechanism for that. I'd probably just have to do a clean recreation of this in 2020 LTS. So we'll see. Either I'll do that before I release it, or that would be something else that you guys can take on. It's not a requirement for a model for a program to use an LTS, but that's the one that's stable. That's the one that there'll be no more changes for, and that I believe Unity would actually support if you're if you're a developer who pays for the support. I believe that's the version that they actually do long-term support for. I believe that's what the LTS even stands for. Okay, so kind of rambled at the end there. Sorry about that, but I hope you found this interested, and I'm looking forward to getting this released for you guys. And please enjoy the rest of your day.